travelers, and welcome to another episode of Vertical Stars Podcast 4th season. I'm my loyal listeners. Thank you for continued support. Enjoy this amazing interview because Chris Safhloff returns to the mothership to talk to new indie publisher, HomeBrewed Comics. Now, come aboard as we're traversing the stars. Hello, Chris. Thank you for coming to Vertical Stars Podcast, or back to the Vertical Stars Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me back. Appreciate
It's
it.
my pleasure. When we last spoke, you were just a writer and an artist. Now, you're a publisher of a company.
Yes.
How in the world did this happen?
Uh wow. Let's go. I gotta go back a little while. So
Okay.
last year, I've been affiliated with friends before with the Savage Sandbox. We were just a group of guys and trying to make comic books, all doing the same thing. And there reached a point last year where I was getting burned out, and then Drew was getting a little burned out too with comics. Just personal lives mixed with the responsibility of putting out a title can be tough sometimes when you don't have the backing and the financial support of a big publisher. And so we just started talking, and I said, well, hey, you're good at this. I'm good at this. How about we team up and do this together? You keep your title, I'll keep mine, but we publish under the same house. And your books, I'll push like they're my own. My books, like we're a team, not two guys doing the same thing, but an actual team. And we sat down, we kind of fleshed out some ideas, and we sat on it for a little bit. And then around November, we started picking back up with that conversation. And I really, it was Thanksgiving. I was sitting with my dad, and my dad looked at me and he said, so when are you going to drop Homebrewed Heroes and just rebrand as Homebrewed Comics? Because nobody knows what Homebrewed Heroes is. Everything's Homebrewed Comics. And I was like, well, I'm talking to, Drew. We have these ideas. And he said, you just need to pull the trigger. My dad, he's the reason I'm in comics. Like my dad got me into it. My dad knows a lot of the older like artists. He did some work on Justice League Europe at one point, like so my dad's a big proponent of my comic book infatuation as a child going into being an adult. So I come home with this new logo idea, which you see on the screen over here. And I sent it to Drew and I said, hey, what do you think of this logo? Loved it. So I sent it to an actual logo designer. I said, hey, can you take this drawing and make it look good? And now we have this. So we're sitting on a new logo. We're like, all right, we'll rebrand in January. And you know, we just had this plan of taking it slow. So we decided to divide and conquer. Drew is really good with digital releases. He's really good with digital platforms. I'm more in the community. I like cons. I like physical media. And I have a lot of connections now with printers and things like that. So I said, hey, I'll take over the physical side, you take over the digital side, and we'll go from there. And somewhere along the way, I'm talking to Dan Price and telling him about this idea. And he was, you know, I could tell we were like flirting with this idea of him coming over, but like neither one of us were really committing to the idea because we didn't know where the other one was. And so I went back to Drew and I said, hey, I think Dan might be, interested in joining this group. What do you think? And Drew was immediately on board. So I went back to Dan and I said, hey, no pressure, no nothing, but if this is something you're interested in, I'd love to have you on board as, marketing manager, director of marketing. You make your own title, like, but you'd be in charge of marketing. And he jumped at it and said, hey, I've actually got some changes coming my way, so I'm in. Put that together, and Dennis was just announced, yesterday or the day. What's today? Thursday? No, today's Friday. So on Wednesday we announced Dennis, and Dennis and I have been working together forever. Cons, things like that. It was a no-brainer to bring him in. Um, and we all have strong titles. So we sat down. We said, here, this is we're all working towards the same goal, but we're all facing the same challenges instead of facing them individually. Let's face them together. Let's publish together and treat every title as if it was our title, not my title, not your title. It's a homebrewed title. And I personally feel that doing that is something that sets us apart from, a lot of other indie guys that work together because it'll always be my title. If you look at even like the great founders of indie comics, Image, there was a lot of infighting because they wanted this artist on their book, on their book, on their book, and I don't want that kind of stuff. We have so many shared talents like Mo Lubison and Lewis who does like covers and colors and all these different things. There should never be an argument. Like we're all in it to win, and that's been the goal. And so, now we are in year one of the rebrand of Homebrewed Comics. We've already got um, titles in Barnes and Noble and on Amazon with Crit and Caspian Porter. Later this year, we're gonna look at putting Bigfoot out there. We're trying to trade paperbacks in the box stores, and then we've got distribution coming for floppies into comic book stores. We got cons lined up. We've got the press release that just hit. That was really cool seeing Fox News and all those big news outlets like Google and things with our faces on it. That was a lot of fun. But we're just keeping everything as we have been in the past. We're going to work hard. We're going to put out good titles, and we're going to do it as a team and make sure that every backer on our Kickstarter is happy, is taken care of, timely manner. We're going to make sure that we're all working together for the same cause.
I think if you're referring to the Associated Press article, that's a hell of a thing. Um, that is a major news outlet. That is significant. That is the same outlet that DC, Marvel, Image, Disney would post their stuff to. So, how cool is it to reach that level of legitimacy?
Well, I mean, it's cool. I don't use the term humble as in like I think I'm humble, but like I came from music. I was signed to a subsidiary of Sony Records, and it's always cool seeing your articles. But like, I think the coolest thing besides seeing it is when, for me, was my dad texting me and going, "Hey, dumbass, I finally saw your article." You know, those are the things that I appreciate is the people who helped me get here. Like my kid, for instance, when she was like, I texted her a picture of it, and then she tells all her friends, and that to me is cool. Because now my kid's cooler because her dad was in the news. To me, it's just one. I like seeing us legitimized. I like seeing these things that show people we're not here to joke around. We're not gonna post up a Kickstarter and never fulfill a book. Um, we're human. We may be late. Those things happen. We can't control. There's a lot of non-controllables being such a small business. We're not, Marvel or DC, and we can't tell a printer we need this now. We can't. We just don't have those funds and that weight. But we have that dedication to get things done. And so when I see in a group chat, hey, Chris is doing big things, that means a lot. Seeing those articles and getting that legitimacy and getting that backing and showing people, hey, like we're not messing around. That's what I love to see. Um, it was a really cool feeling in one group chat today. A guy who's been, he's been in indie comics, he's worked for Pixar, and he was like, Chris has only been, this is literally my fifth year. Like the launch of this book is my 5 year anniversary.
Yeah.
He goes, Chris has been here for 5 years. He's got his 8 books out. He's got a trade paperback. He's got a stuffed animal. He's got an energy drink, and now he's in the Associated Press. You know, uh, and I hadn't really put all those things together before. And I'm like, oh wow, I did something. Like all my stuff. That's cool when I see it coming from people who owe me nothing.
Mm.
People who owe me absolutely nothing, and they say, "Hey, you guys are doing stuff." That's cool. I like it when I open my inbox and I have like Mo, and he's like, "Man, you guys are taking off." That kind of stuff means a lot to me because my friends are seeing the growth that have been here since day one when I was launching my first failed Kickstarter to now when we've got three running, three coming at the same time. We've got between, I think, all three campaigns, we're upwards of almost 200 followers on our campaigns, which is awesome. We're getting tons of hits on our website every single day, which is great. The activity level that we're seeing is just amazing. And that means that there's a lot of support, there's a lot of need out there for what we're doing.
Now, Crit, issue 8. This is the first official launch of HomeBrewed Comics, correct?
First Kickstarter, yes.
So is Crit how does Crit represent the company at this point?
Oh, that's a good one. Well, it is my title. So,
For some people, it's
um,
exactly your company.
I might be biased, but it represents the company because I made it. Um, all right. Well, one thing about Homebrewed, um, you know, Crit was my first title. Crit's the reason I got into comics to begin with. But Crit has always been just a story with no limitations and boundaries because everything that is in Crit comes from a tabletop game. It's a recording. No one can control my book, my story, because everything that happens already happened on our tabletop. No one can say, "Hey, you know, I don't like I couldn't hire an editor if that makes sense. I can't put this out to a test market and say, what do you think? And then come back and edit it. I can't do what Marvel does with movies and and all the movie theaters, they put this thing out and they're like, hey, what do you guys think? And they take it back and they fix it and they come back. We can't do that because I think it would be disingenuous to the product itself, which is homebrewed. Like we're putting out titles we want to put out. I like to use the old FUBU method, like for us, by us. And that's the truth. Every book I wouldn't put out Crit if I wouldn't want to read it myself. And if I don't want to read it, I don't want other people reading it, if that makes sense. So it represents the fact that here here we are making things that, and I will say people said we couldn't do because I had naysayers from the very beginning. My ex-wife was like, "You're going to draw comic books."
That's why she's
And
the
when we were married, we were happily married at the time. I'm not using the X term as as a hit on her, but at the time we were happily married, and she was like, "You're gonna draw. You don't even know how to draw. How are you gonna draw comic books?" And I was like, "I'm gonna learn." That's the homebrewed method. If I don't know it, I'm gonna learn it. And you talk to Dan, you see Drew, and now Dennis. All of us have the same mentality. It's gonna get done. We're gonna do it our way, but we're gonna put out quality product that's not limited by anyone else.
I think that's absolutely awesome. So I think one question that's important, obviously, about your book is that you have all at one point or another dealt with other um, indie comic book companies, right? And I have
Yep.
dealt with my own. Not gonna well, fuck Arcane, but Arcane Publishing, and you all have dealt with your own other companies. So what did you learn from dealing with those indie companies that you thought to yourself now with Homebrewed going, not that. We're gonna be this, not that.
Oh, well, I pay attention to everybody around me at all times. In fact, I will use this before I even published my first copy of Crit, I had been drawing some comics and I started following some indie creators on Instagram. And I remember seeing Concrete in their book, and I was like, "Oh, that's what indie comics looks like." Forever I thought indie comics was, and I had been out of comics for almost 15 years at this point. I'm like, indie comics is like whatever, it's not necessarily the highest of quality of art and stuff. It's just the normal person putting out a book. And they set the bar really high for me. In fact, I went back and learned more about drawing and art so I could at least come, a 20th of where they were at with the art. And so I take note on what works and what doesn't, what people react to and what they don't. Um, and I don't subscribe to like there's creators out there that, how do I put this? They want that immediate satisfaction and gratification, right? My Kickstarter funded, I'm happy. But we're on day 5 and my Kickstarter is not funded, I'm not happy, I'm going to cancel it. Or, the stress levels that you see with different creators. And I have those, as many Kickstarters as I've ran, especially before I hit the submit button. It's like, oh man, does anybody even care about this book? Um, but there's never been a thought process of like, I want to pull that back. Um, and you see a lot of people that get worn out. They don't want to do it anymore, or maybe their book didn't fund or didn't fund as high as they wanted to, so now they just don't care about the next one. Sad to say, but I got 42 that I've got planned, and whether you like it or not, you're getting it. So I don't, if I'm 90 and I'm over here, with an electronic arm trying to figure out how to draw, however I have to get it done, I'm going to get it done. Um, and a lot of these people come out, and I'm looking at some negative stuff, that I fix on. But on the positive side, I also take a look at what works and what people are doing, and I pay attention silently from the side. And I don't envy anyone. I don't say, man, I like I'll take Dan. Came out the gate just strong. And never once was I like, man, that guy has 150 backers. Well, how did he get 100? And I said, it wasn't that. It was, how did he get 150 backers? With nothing. What did he do? I'm going to learn from him. I'm going to take notes on that, and I'm going to come back stronger. And then I think of dumb ideas that I think no one else will do, like random live launches. I remember I did my first one, and I think I called the first live launch I did was because my launch was late. So in 2020, I had COVID, and I was supposed to launch my book on like right after my birthday. Well, I got COVID on my birthday. And the day I go to launch, I'm talking to my friend Jason, and I was like, "Hey, why can't I launch my Kickstarter?" I was like, "I know I submitted it." He's like, "No, you didn't." So I submitted it, and finally, like 7 hours later, it went. They approved it. So we had all this marketing out there for this thing to go, and I couldn't launch. So the minute it went live, I called Jason. We got on a live thing, and I said, "Hey, I'm launching the Kickstarter right now." And we were able to get like 20, 30 people on the live, which funded the Kickstarter real quick. So it wasn't something that like I had planned. It was literally like a last minute, like last ditch effort to promote this book. And it worked. And I said, okay, I'm doing that every time now, except I'm not going to screw up the date. We're going to do this the real way and promote it and make it better. And so I saw that and I was like, okay, so now I see other people doing those things and they work. Then you look at people who do they launch at the same time and they might be in the same circle. They're competing for an audience at the same time. So I said to Dan, hey, we're launching on the same day. Instead of competing for an audience, let's launch together. Success. And I look at other people around me that are successful and I say, what can we do together? I have a thought process and I will keep this till the day I die. You are who you surround yourself with. And I like to surround myself with innovative people, creative people, and successful people. And they don't always coincide. You know what I mean? You can be creative and not successful. But if I bring enough creative people and enough successful people and I put them all around each other, they're all going to be creative and successful. And I'm going to be in the middle of it and I'm going to absorb that knowledge too.
I
And
think
luckily in indie comics, we have a ton of that stuff.
I think the reality of indie comic books is that the graveyard of indie comic books is quite massive, right?
Yeah.
Um, a lot of concerns of I think readers is that you buy two issues of a comic book from an indie person and then the comic book just disappears and nothing ever happens from it.
Unfortunately,
How do
yes, that
we
is the average.
Right. So how do we how is Homebrew Comics being designed to not fall into those traps?
Well, luckily, everybody in HomeBrewed Comics aside from Dennis is putting out a second book now. They have the crossover, which we're counting as a third book for Celestial Knight, and technically a sixth book for Caspian. We're all past issue 2. We're all established in our own way, and that was important to me because taking on non-established people puts you at a very high risk in indie comics. The average creator, like you said, doesn't get past book 2, and there's a reason for it. Issue 1, your mom and dad, your friends and family all back that book.
Hmm.
And it gives you, like I said earlier, immediate satisfaction and gratification. My book funded, my book got 5 grand, my book did this. But then comes the hard part, right? Then comes fulfilling the book. And if you haven't done it before, because I remember the first time I did it, that was a nightmare.
Yep.
I got to pay how much to ship this thing? Oh, it's damaged. Oh, it got sent back to me because the address is wrong. Oh, the Kickstarter didn't get like the money didn't get taken for the Kickstarter. Like all these things that come into the post Kickstarter world are tough. And then let's just say, and that's in the world where your book is done prior to the Kickstarter being done. What if your book isn't? And then the artist you hired didn't get the work done, or you're the artist and you break your hand, or or like life happens and now all of a sudden you're late. Like all these different things that add stress to it, and then you fulfill it finally. And you're like, okay, I got book one done. I'm gonna go back for a book two. And you do book two. But the problem that you run into, and this isn't all creators, problem people are gonna run into, well, how do I beat issue two, issue one? Well, you don't. You don't. And that's a fact. Like, well, and majority of us don't because you have the number one fan, the people that only collect number ones. You have, like I said, friends and family. So issue two, you see that dip and that hurts the majority of us. Now, some people come back on issue two and they do great, and that's great for you. Majority of people, and this is in art, music, everything you do, because that sophomore one is always like the question. And you go to Kickstarter, you fund probably. You don't fund as high as you want. Um, and that now you're burned out because the first one was so tough and you were expecting the second one to be bigger than the first one, but then you realize mom and dad didn't back it because they don't need it. They got the first one. They supported you already. Your friends and family, they just supported you. Now you're stuck with the fans. And that's actually not a bad thing. It's really not a bad thing to think, hey, my friends and family didn't back this, but I still funded, and these people are continuous readers. And that's a good thing, but a lot of people take their ego and it hurts. And so by the time they're done with issue two, their egos hurt, their wallets hurt. They've had to ship, 200 books, and that's a pain in the neck. They've had to deal with the books coming back. They've had to deal with a printer who was late. They've had to deal with, like all these different things that you don't know. And so they go to the third book and they're like, I don't want to do this anymore. Okay. Or I thought I'd be picked up by Image. Why didn't Image sign me? Why didn't Boom give me a contract? Because they're not gonna, like, and honestly, it's from my perspective, it's good. I love the self-publishing realm because I have all the control. So, everyone that's on our resume right now, me, Dan, like I said, the only person that isn't at a book number three is Dennis, who will be launching a book number three, and with this crossover that puts him at that mark. But he's done enough, and he's fulfilled enough, and he's been there, and we're all tried and true. So if you're worried about jumping into Homebrewed Comics, I have 8 issues already. So, if you last 8 issues and you don't get bored, then I got more coming too. Dan's got issue three, which is the fourth in the series because he has Hennigan. He has a side story. Caspian's at, 0 plus the other four. So we're at 5 issues there. We have enough to keep everybody happy. And we have other stuff in the works too. We have a couple other crossovers that are going to hit. We have some dual publishing, or dual writing. Drew and I are working on a story together. And who else know? I won't go too much, but like, who else knows what's going to happen? You have four very creative, very driven people with teams behind them. That's going to push the envelope no matter what we do.
And I think that's cool because and you kind of spoke to my heart a bit because as someone who has completed 2 issues of my own Kickstarter, I'm thinking to myself, yeah, yeah. It is the reality. That second issue, I think I had the same experience where it's like, oh, you know what I'm saying? Like, so and that is a very real thing. That I think that the people watching and who've been in the Kickstarter world are definitely can feel it in their hearts.
Yeah. Um, and I don't say that as like a negative. Like I really don't. I think that if you're hurt by your second Kickstarter, there's a few things to look at. Um, what could I have done better? I mean, let's just put it real. Like if you're putting a book out there and you're putting your heart into it,
Yeah.
you know, did you do the marketing right? Did you promote it? Did you just expect your backers from the first one to come back and tell their friends? There's all these things that you learn, and you don't learn them overnight, and you don't learn them unless you fail, or unless someone that's much more successful than you takes you under their wing and for some reason decides to make you successful. Um, I'm in a group that we've been working on this indie fighting game for a while. And the guy who's, you know, the developer, because the rest of us are just comic book creators. He's the only guy that
Yeah.
knows the program. He tells us every day how many people come into game development thinking, I took this class, I'm going to be a game developer. That's not how it works. You don't put out one book and all of a sudden you're an indie comic book publisher. You put out one book, you put out two books, you're on your way up there. When you hit your third, fourth, and fifth book, you're a veteran now because half indie comics don't last past book two.
Mm.
And that's the challenge with distribution right there. And that's why, um, you know, in I think the last time we talked, I probably spoke about this. I worked in distribution for a while for board game companies, but board game companies and or board game stores and comic book stores are usually coinciding. Most stores that stock board games will stock comic books. They overlap quite a bit. And when I got into this, I started calling these clients and I'm saying, hey, like, would you carry this? Yeah, get past book two. Why? Most creators don't get past it, and that leaves me, the store, on the hook because I push your book, I sell your book, and now all of a sudden my clients, they're over here saying, "Oh, well, I can't trust you because that guy didn't come through." And so that actually is one of the reasons why I wasn't really pushing hard for distribution until I had, 8 to 10 books because I can space it out. I can also, when I go to retail, cut the books up, like, hey, this is a 50-page book. Now all of a sudden I have two, right? Um, that gives me a little freedom to expand. And so I said, hey, I can do that. And then I have more shelf space. And now I can earn, and that word right there, earn it. I can earn the right to be on the shelf. I think a lot of people let their ego tell them they deserve everything, and we don't deserve anything.
Mm.
When we get those backers on Kickstarter, we don't deserve them. We earned them.
Yeah.
You know, every Kickstarter I do, like right now, I'm late, and I told my backers I'm late. Last year was arguably the hardest year I've had since 2017 when my mom passed away. Going through a divorce the day I launched my Kickstarter, my wife says, "Hey, I want a divorce," and I'm like, "Oh, geez," and I have to smile on all these live shows promoting a book, and then I had a month where I just couldn't look at the tablet. Um, but I was real with everybody. I said, "Hey, this happened because life happens." And luckily, the feedback I got from them has been positive. And this book launches at the end of April. I'm fulfilling that book literally next week. The books will be on my doorstep on Tuesday. I just checked the tracking. So by Easter weekend, I'll have everybody's books in the mail. And I promised them that this would not start until I fulfilled. And that's another thing. When you fulfill 8 books, 7 books, people trust you.
Yeah.
So if you've only fulfilled one, on your second one, do they trust you yet? How did you fulfill? And I always include a thank you because I am thankful. I'm very thankful to be where I'm at. I'm very thankful for everybody that's ever read Crit. Some of the best instances are when I'm on a live show with someone and they bring up something I didn't even think anybody picked up on in a book. Or we were at Heroes Con and one guy walks up and he's like, "I'm here for Samedi." What? You came all the way to Heroes Con to get a stuffed animal? Yeah, I have all your books. I just don't have the stuffed Samedi. Well, luckily I have them. Um, that that hits home. That means I've earned that person spending $50 on a ticket just to come spend $30 on a stuffed animal. Like that's a lot of work. And indie comics is a lot of work. And I was on Twitter the other day, and I don't do Twitter. I don't do X. I just don't. I'm an Instagram guy, and I check my Facebook. Um, Scott Snyder had said something, and I believe Paluto shared it, and it said like you don't get into comics to make money. You get into comics to share your passion. And there are some people that can make money. There's those people that can. They have that diamond in the rough, and they make a real quick dime on their book, and they're happy. I don't care about the money. I care about people reading my book.
Mm.
I'm here for the passion part of it. And that is one thing about everybody in Homebrewed Comics. None of us are making money off this stuff. Let's be real. We're always talking about like, what's our budget this week? What, the other guys are all married still. And they're like, hey, what's the wife gonna let me spend? Luckily, I don't have that issue, but I do have a budget and I have a cat who's very needy, so I have to ask him every day, "Hey, can I buy this?" Um, but you have these budgets you gotta live by to make your passion a thing.
Mhm.
And every title on Homebrewed is a passion project. And
So,
that's another thing you don't get in mainstream comics. You don't get passion projects anymore. How many times have you picked up Spider-Man the last year and said, "Oh, this writer's really passionate about Spider-Man"? I can tell you none of them because he's not married yet. I just want to see him and Mary Jane. And yes, we have that the what the side the Ultimate Universe version where they gave it to us finally, but it's like, come on.
right. I
How many
mean,
times are you gonna torture this guy?
well, I think the cool thing, I think people should know about Homebrew Comics because I think because of the world we live in at this point, Kickstarter seems to be the distributor now of indie comics. However, in the world of Homebrew Comics, you guys actually have national is it national distribution at this point for physical copies at brick and mortar stores.
We do have national, yes, through philbo distribution, which will be launching in, I want to say June. It may be July, but I think it's June. Um, and we're launching out the gate with issues one of Crit, of Caspian, and of Bigfoot Knows Karate. And those will go to storefronts. And those also will be new exclusive title covers just for retail.
And so so in April we're gonna have a release of Crit number 8.
Mhm.
Bigfoot Karate is in May. What's next?
Caspian Porter versus Celestial Knight, and that's in June.
Very cool. I mean, I think it's always great to see a new indie publisher because there's chance for innovation, chance for just usually the best creative moments of an indie comic book company is when they're just launching. You know, they all the cool stories and comic books come out. What can you tell our listeners to look forward to coming up?
Well, the big thing is the launch of Crit 8 isn't just one book. It's a 5-year anniversary. So I completely remastered issue 1, which is a big deal because that's the title that started this all. That was an accidental thing. I actually drew issue 1 just for the players of my D&D game, and it's turned into what you see now. All of this is because I wanted to draw something for my friends who played D&D with me. And so that's a really big deal. Also, I'm reissuing number 5 with a complete newly drawn end of the book from Robert Nix. So that's arguably 3 new books you can get in one Kickstarter, as well as I'm doing yeah, they're called rock glasses, but they're whiskey glasses. Um, because Samedi drinks whiskey, and in the book, one of the characters is drinking while he's talking quite a bit. So I was like, hey, let's do collector, whiskey glasses, and you'll have one with the cat face on it, and I'll just do different versions. And the reason I did that was actually inspired by the old McDonald's stuff when Batman came out, because you got the different
Mhm.
glasses. So that's going to be a big deal. That's gonna be a really big deal for me and everybody else on my team because 5 years in indie comics with 8 issue, technically 9 because we have the issue 0, like that's a big deal. That's something to celebrate. So definitely join us April 30th for the live launch of that. And then we follow that right up with Bigfoot in May, 2 weeks later. We're launching Bigfoot with Bigfoot number 3. And if you know anything about Bigfoot, it's going to be your fun, action-packed book with a little bit of drama and mystery and suspense in there. But the Chupacabra with a shotgun might be my favorite character. I've told Dan that since he told me the name. I actually absolutely love that character, so I'm glad it's coming back. And then, Celestial Knight versus Caspian Porter's honestly, for me, it's a big deal. I haven't read any of it. Now, I will say this too. If you go to our website, Homebrewed Comics right now, the ash can version of that book is available. So I think it's real cheap. I want to say it was like $5 or $6 with shipping. Um, that's available for you to check out. And that's cool because Celestial Knight is this, he's our cape. If you know cape characters, he's our big cape guy. He's got this awesome energy weapon and he flies and he's got the cool dog, Um, how is he gonna fight a guy who has a jetpack and a laser gun? How does that work? And I'm keeping my ear to the ground on it, but honestly, I'm excited to read it because I love both characters. Um, Caspian Porter is the John, I want to say his name's John from Fifth Element. Remember Fifth Element?
Yeah.
Um, he he's just like has the worst day at work the first day, and he reminds me of him, John from the Fifth Element mixed with Boba Fett. He's got the backpack, he's got the blaster pistol, with a little bit of Han Solo in there because we all like the swashbuckling characters, and I just don't see how they fight, and I'm really curious. I'm like, I get Batman versus Superman because Batman has plot armor. We all know that. So how is Caspian going to do that without 50 years of plot armor? I just want to know. And that book by itself is going to be fun. Both characters clearly, they're both good guys, so it's not like one's evil, one's not. Caspian's from like 2086, and Celestial Knight's from modern day. So how do they do this? So there's so many questions that I have, and they better not pull a He-Man from the 80s where they just happened to go through a portal on Earth, and now we're at 80s Earth, and I'm sure it's gonna be cool. I've seen some of the drawings. They have a good team on there too. And I like seeing Dennis now inking someone else's work. That's unique too. Um, it's just going to be a really fun book. So definitely check out all three. And I will say this, I haven't mentioned it yet, and Dan will kill me if I don't. We have every Kickstarter, every book has a coupon. And we have 3 digits on the coupons. So you collect all three, and then you'll be able to go to our website, type that completed code in, and you'll be able to get Homebrewed Zero, which is, if you remember from the 90s, literally quite literally, it's going to be a rip-off idea of Image Zero. Um, just the idea, not the, we're not going to put troll in there. I promise you. We all have individual titles we're going to put in this book. We're actually having a meeting this Sunday to solidify what that looks like. And those will, the issue zero will consist of homebrewed universe characters that you won't see, like you won't get these pages in the back of a crit book. You won't get these pages in the back of something else. Um, this is exclusively in issue zero, and it will be exclusively for the people who back all three campaigns. So it's going to be for me, and I've said this a few times on lives. For me, it's a really, really big deal because my daughter is a better artist than me. Hands down, I would post her work, but she would kill me. This kid doesn't need she doesn't need to see a picture of something. She can just envision it in her head. She can draw it. And she's an amazing colorist. And we've talked for years about her and I doing some work together. So I said, hey, I'm probably going to do 6 pages of the animals. And if you've read Crit, I've got a talking cat with a top hat, a bow tie, and he drinks rum. There's the hippie lizard, and then I've got a really pompous British owl. And then there's also the issue about the ship. There is a little robot called Dr. Rumbato, who he's very sad that his purpose in life is just to serve coffee. So the four of them pretty much run the coffee shop when the guys are out. And so this whole 6 page story takes place with them in the coffee shop and kind of the shenanigans that happen when no one's around. And so I said, hey, I'm going to draw them. Will you color them? So interior art by me, colors by my daughter. And that's a big deal for me. I think that's going to be really cool to share with people. And I think that's a really cool reason to actually check it out because my 14-year-old kid is going to be floored that someone wants to see her work. So that's a reason to check it out. And then, of course, you're going to have some side characters from Bigfoot and then as well from Caspian Porter and Celestial Knight will make an appearance in that issue zero. Um, we have a few of our team members that have talked to us about possibly getting some stuff in that book too. So more of it will be solidified on Sunday. But my idea was set in stone the minute they said, "Hey, we're going to do an issue zero with characters we don't publish. And I said, I've got 3 animals and a robot. I'm gonna go. It's gonna be a coffee shop with just them running it, and let's see what kind of chaos I can cause.
That is awesome. Chris, I like that. I hope Homebrewed Comics is a massive success. It sounds like you got some great stuff coming up. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. I appreciate it. As always, Jeff. I will get on here and talk your ear off whenever you want.
You definitely guys got to come back. We'll come back and we'll talk some campaigns as well.
Awesome.
All right. Have a great night, sir.